Hi, this is Shubham Tiwari.
Hi, this is Nilangan.
Welcome to the Salespanel podcast, where we bring you the journeys and playbooks of thought leaders from the B2B world. Tune in for all things on data-driven marketing, product-led growth, and customer intelligence. Moving on with today's episode, our guest today is the Chief Marketing Officer at Tapple, who talks about QR codes, first-party data, marketing analytics, contactless technology, and experiential marketing. Karen Kelly, welcome to Salespanel.
Thanks so much for having me.
So those of the audience in the audience, those of in the audience who don't know you, you also you talk about three things. You love to talk about three things: psychology, communication, and people. And as a marketer, you of course you're passionate about data. So as the voice of the company brand, in what order would you put all four of these and why?
That's a really good question. I think I really think about them sort of as it's almost like they all come together for one really beautiful result. When I think about data and the role that plays, really our product sort of sits at the heart of these things, which is this idea of through communication, you can gather data about your audience, which really paints this really beautiful picture from a psychological perspective and a motivational perspective. Who are they? And taking them from kind of the masses to an individual. And so when I think about it, it's almost like painting a picture where you have, you need critical tools to kind of illuminate, who somebody is or create this picture, right? You need communication, you need to understand who they are, you need to gather the numbers that you need to kind of peel back the layers in the same way where you need, a canvas, you need paintbrushes, you need carving tools, and you need colors to kind of really understand all of it. So to me, it's really, I love people, but to understand who people are, and that's really what I'm passionate about. It's like you need these different tools to kind of pull it all together. So for me, data came later in the game. I was a psychology major in college. I've always loved people. I've always loved diving in. And then my professional journey kind of led me to this next natural place of, really where we are in 2022, or when I joined the company in 2019, how we can start to use numbers to understand people better, and really the gift that is.
Okay, so since you were in psychology, and is it correct to assume that you are most curious about behavioral data, like how people behave and like how that affects and what you can do with it in marketing?
Yeah, definitely. The underpinnings of all of that behavior is really what excites me. And that's really what excited me about joining Tapple, was that it was this vision, from our founders around this idea of how can we move away from trying to understand how people behave when they're sitting in front of their computer on the web. This is a very small part of their life, and we can only get a very small piece of understanding there. And really kind of say, what about the rest of their time? What about the rest of their world when they're walking around, when they're grocery shopping, when they're at an event, when they're with their friends, when they're at a restaurant? How can we start to get to know them there and engage with them and build relationships there? And that was very, very exciting to me.
Interesting. So we're going to go talk about Tapple in a while, but before that, we have a few questions. So Karen, what are the most important decisions you make as a marketing leader of a startup organization?
So I'd say, startups are different, obviously, than mid-growth or late stage, in that you don't have as many resources, right? Both people and financially. So you have to constantly almost have like a pulse on what do we need to be focused on at this moment. And those decisions are really, really critical, really for, the survival of the company, because if we make a decision to go spend, $30,000 on an event sponsorship, right? That is a large chunk of change for a startup.
Right.
So you need to feel very confident in those conversions. And I think, there is a great propensity, I think, for waste in startups, and kind of running off in one direction and kind of leaving other things on the floor. And so it's really, really important to kind of constantly be thinking about, like, where's my money best spent, and how can I really get to my target in the most efficient and personalized manner? As a startup, we cannot be focused on running massive digital campaigns, right? And just kind of hope the brand messaging sticks. We've got to build relationships. We've got to start on a much more personal level. And so I think that those are some of the most important decisions. How can we make kind of like the deepest impressions with the fewest amount of dollars?
Yeah, right. So yeah, we also face similar challenges as a startup. And what we did initially is we created this playbooks. So one specific agenda for a playbook. So like you said, like somebody can just drift off in one direction. So we created these playbooks for different agendas, and we would pick one for the day or for the week and then go about it. So I think that helped us.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it also really helps to align the organization.
Yeah.
I think that also can be a challenge and something that we work towards, by instituting regular meetings and things like this. It's like, where are we at financially? Where are we spending our time? Where are we spending our money? And just kind of making sure we're all focused on the same things and we have the same priority order.
Cool. So you started your career in JWT, which is America's best known advertising brand, and you have developed campaigns for companies like Domino's and Rolex. So can you provide us a breakdown of what goes into creating campaigns for these major brands?
Sure. So we're going back maybe 15 years. So it's funny to think about how much the industry has evolved. It's like digital marketing was sort of like a twinkle in your eye at that point. Yeah. But really, it's like these were, especially back then, these were long-term projects, right? So we'd start, of course, we always start with a creative brief. They had very strict measurements around that also, where it was absolutely never more than one page. And that getting to that key message, I mean, this is where I learned how to be brief and the importance of brevity, right? It's like the more words, the more you dilute, the more you can get off track. Yep. Really, when you're we ran mainly traditional marketing. So TV, radio, print, all of these things needed to align. So there was a tremendous amount of work done to keep that alignment in place. So once that creative brief was done, of course, then you have all these creative teams competing, art directors, copywriters, building campaigns in secret, and then coming back together to pitch all of that. Those storyboards were printed out at the time. I'm positive that's not the case anymore. So it was really like, I learned so much, obviously, but I also learned how to be really diplomatic. I think that's one of the key pieces too, as you're working between, I worked in account management. So, we were the face of the agency. We needed to make sure everything was well coordinated, that we stayed on budget, and essentially really often served as the communication between, right, the client and our creatives, and kind of how do we make sure that their goals stay aligned and that communication is clear, not only through the campaign, but that everyone feels heard, right? And that's incredibly important. So they were 4 to 6 month endeavors, really, start to finish. We did most of the production in-house. As you mentioned, JWT was the world's first advertising agency. So amazing place to learn. And so they were really, it was, when I think about now the time frame of how quickly things move, not just from digital and socials perspective, but also from the perspective of producing TV commercials and things like that. We just have the technology now to move a lot faster. But it was great to be able to see, every little piece of how things played out. I would physically carry tapes over to CBS to get Domino's TV commercials done in time. So great learning experience.
Yeah, I think it's been a long road, right? Like when you started your career, I think SaaS, currently you are in SaaS, and when you started your career, I think Salesforce was there in like 2000s maybe. So SaaS was not even that prominent, and now coming to here and you're now in SaaS.
So that's how that happened.
Right, cool. So speaking of Tapple, you're diving into personalized marketing in the physical world with QR marketing. So can you tell us more about it?
Sure. So, I think one of the biggest things that we kind of run into is people hear QR and they think, oh, QR is free, right? Or QR codes, I know what they are. But then you also hear data, and you also, you hear that all over the place, right? Marketing, data-driven metrics, et cetera, right? It gets very mushy in our industry. So really, we think of ourselves as a marketing data company. We just happen to use QR codes to gather that information. So we are a physical world marketing company. And so our technology is used anywhere in the pathway of a consumer in the physical world. So B2B, B2C, and it's good for any industry. It's really good for any brand, small or large. But the idea is that going back to those early things you mentioned in terms of things that are passions of mine, communication, people psychology, and painting this picture. That's what Tapple does. It allows you to kind of drop this funnel into the physical world to start communicating with your audience and then start to paint that picture on the back end through the data that we collect. And so we actually go ahead when that information comes in, we're doing all sorts of scoring and metrics on the background to then be able to help you say, hey, let us give you some insights about your crowd in New York City versus your crowd in Chicago, or let us tell you more about how you're converting at the front of the store versus the back of the store. So it's really kind of this way to kind of paint a picture of your physical world marketing efforts and understand performance and benchmarks from it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think QR marketing is currently the hot thing right now. Like I see these Easter eggs in films, in TV shows that lead to marketing landing pages. Like there is this Marvel series that's on air right now called Moon Knight, and it has QR code Easter eggs shown in the first few episodes. And if you scan the QR, it leads to their comic books, a way to engage some of their fans, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. I will tell you, we've had a ton of interest from CTV folks and streaming folks. And it's, I think, in thinking about like brand positioning and this kind of thing, this is the kind of place where a brand can really get tripped up because like we could market to the TV folks, the direct mail folks, the experiential folks. I mean, there's so many places you could use the product. We would be in serious danger, right, of just like running out of breath, right? But also like really diluting the message. It's like, if we make it too broad. So we have been very focused on experiential. And one of the reasons why we're so focused on experiential marketing for the last 3 years is because they have a massive problem that's very clear and has always been there, which is how do they turn around to the brand and say that they just serviced, if you're an agency, say, all right, we just spent $10 million on this activation. Here's the information. Here's your ROI. It's always been a sorry state of affair because there hasn't been a tool to really be able to help them quantify. It's like, how many samples did you give out or how many people came? This is not actionable information, right? It doesn't really help them get to know the audience better. So we've been very focused there for that reason. However, since that Coinbase commercial came out, I mean, that it was coming.
It was brilliant.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And like the way they did it too. I mean, it's funny. I don't know if you saw Burger King did something similar a few years ago. I was just looking at this the other day on iSpot TV and, it was a moving QR code. All it had was a picture of a burger and it had a moving QR code and a little bit of like background noise. No call to action. There was branding on it, so that's different. But really just a lot of mystery around it. The idea is to drive curiosity. That's always a risk. Are people going to, especially back when it ran in 2019, it's like QR was just starting to come up. People didn't even really know. I mean, I would be very curious to know what the performance was actually on that from them, because I'm sure it was better than most people expect. That being said, if you were to compare it to like that Coinbase spot.
Yeah, their app crashed after that. Yeah.
The Coinbase. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They've made a lot of those statistics public, which is great for us too, as people are coming to us or other folks and saying like, hey, what are the benchmarks? I mean, I think that's the next big conversation. What are the benchmarks for QR on TV? It's like, we're making them right now. Yeah. And it's fun. It's really fun to be on the front end of all of this and helping our clients. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have is just kind of helping them ease into it, right? Because they are so used to measuring and, being able to go back and report based on, what they know about the market in general, say email marketing, right? It's like, oh, your open rate should be over 25%, that kind of thing. And it's a little nerve wracking to kind of take a step into the new and be part of the learning,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also had a QR marketing strategy from a chocolate company. So what they did is basically they have this QR code on the packets and you can share a secret message to someone who's gifting you the chocolate, and you can create that. And when somebody scans the code, and it will just show something on VR and where you step in and then the message shows up. So it's kind of cool.
It's awesome. Like that kind of instant connectivity where you get excited about what's behind that code. It's like, oh, I can send a message to my friend who that's amazing. I want to do that, and I think that's a great example of a great use of QR in marketing. I think I see a lot of bad examples out there right now, where it's gotta be a mutually beneficial experience.
Right.
Got to facilitate that handshake and, learn more. Yeah, it's not going to cut it. You've got to really give them something, let them know there's an immediate reward for them. And so, whether that's intrinsic or extrinsic, it's very important to do that.
Right. You worked on marketing and advertising initially and then made a switch where you joined a medical center and treated patients with neurological disorders for 2 years. So after that, you came back and you founded one of Boston's most profitable media companies and ran it for 10 years. And can you tell us more about the story? Like, how did this short medical stint of 2 years shape your entire career?
Yeah. I appreciate that you're interested in the different sort of roads that I've taken. I think that it's really helped build me into have a unique professional skill set. I think one of the biggest things was as I was leaving marketing, I learned so much about branding and communication people. I love that, but I felt like it wasn't feeding my soul. Helping Domino's sell more pizza is great, but I felt like at the end of the day, I needed something that made me feel like I was making a difference in the world. And so I wound up getting a master's in communication sciences and disorders from Emerson, and I became a speech pathologist. And so I worked with neurogenically impaired patients, teaching them how to read again, speak again, eat again. It was a big shift in terms of my day-to-day. However, it really kept those core passions of mine intact. And the biggest thing I think I walked away from that was learning how to empathize. And I think you hear the word empathy a lot in marketing these days, but what does it really mean? And bigger question, who's teaching marketers how to be empathetic? I think that's a very difficult thing to learn in SaaS. So I really feel fortunate that I was able to have this experience where, sitting next to patients every day who can no longer take a sip of water, and learning how to put myself in their shoes, and learning how to help make them better and be patient and be what they need me to be on that day. And so taking that skill set and bringing it to the corporate world and bringing it into a business that I then started to run on my own in SaaS, I think it's a unique gift. So that's really, I think the biggest thing that came out of. And so I did that for 6 years while I then started my next company. So yeah, that's really how it plays into how it helps me now.
So Tapple is your first go at a SaaS product. So what are the key challenges that you have faced in brand positioning and product marketing, and how did you solve them?
Yeah, I think, as we've been talking about, we are cutting our teeth right now for the entire industry for physical world marketing, right? This is a brand new market. So there's a lot of challenges there. It definitely requires resilience. But I would say, so for us, number one, it's, oh, you're a QR code company. No.
Yeah.
And QR helps us in some ways. Well, certainly helps us now because it's hot, but it also helps because it helps people understand, oh, your physical world. Oh, okay, I get it. It's not when people are surfing the web. So it helps us, but it's also our enemy in a way, because it brings down the value of what we do in some ways when we start getting compared to other QR code companies. So that's the number one thing that I feel like in terms of branding and positioning that I've had to think a lot about. So constantly saying, hey, we are a physical world marketing company, physical world. It's like when they say, when you get tired of hearing it and you're hearing it in your sleep, it's like, that's when your consumer it's just started to sink in.
Right.
So really it's like just constantly harping on that. I think that's probably one of the biggest things. But then the other end of it too is really focusing on, we're a data company. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we are. So the product does a lot of things. I always say it's like, it's a party in the front and business in the back, right? You scan the code, you get into some kind of fun game, quiz, something interactive. But then on the back end is really this incredibly robust data stream and analytics that, so So it's like, how do you tell people in a very simple way? It's like, okay, well, this is a way for you to start understanding your consumers in the physical world and measuring those campaigns. That's what it is. Right. Oh, by the way, we use QR because I don't want you to think that we're a digital product.
Cool. So, I mean, speaking more on brand positioning, do you have any playbook in place? How do you, strategize when, implementing brand positioning?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a playbook, I have one essentially for the marketing department, but this is I think that this is actually a really good question to think about like where we are in the startup phase, right? Like we are at the very beginning. So, from our perspective, it's and think about too, like the last 2 years of COVID, we were focusing on experiential, everything went out the window. So, at that point too, it's like, this is probably relevant to this question is like, what do we do then? We had just started hitting our stride in December 2020. Is that right? Nope, December 2019. And then COVID hits 2 months later.
Yeah.
Everything shuts down. We're still in this baby phase. I mean, we did a friends and family round, a year before that, but now we can clearly see it's going to be at least a year before we can get really like back on track. So within 2 weeks, we realized, there were certain industries that were going to continue to function. One of which was TV production, one of which was like construction, and there were some businesses. And so we were like, well, okay, we start to see this pop about health screening. And so we say, okay, well, we can do that. Our platform is extremely flexible. We essentially can just productize a health screener and run with that. And I mean, it's hard to say, but I feel like we moved so fast because we're a startup, right? It's like any other big company, this takes at least 2 months to figure out like, what are you going to put out there? How are you going to message it? Put together the digital campaign, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, we're a small, scrappy startup. Like this was a huge advantage for us. So within 3 weeks, like we had productized this health screener. I had created, a web presence for it, a lead gen page. And then essentially what we did was we did a couple of different things. We started to pursue Google ads. And this is interesting. Like, and I'm doing the math on that. And we start to run campaigns, just basic, top line, like Google ad, need a health screener, like getting back to work. And within like 2 weeks, the cost had gone up to like $50 a click. It is the highest I've ever seen. And we were competing with groups like IBM. So like once the big guys got in the game, we had to completely stop, reverse field and say, okay, what are we going to do instead? So essentially what we ended up doing was partnering with a health education company. So they were doing essentially COVID education for, folks who were becoming COVID officers and for these different industries. So we formed a partnership with them and then essentially had promotion through them, also a really lovely data feed of people who had been trained. And so went after people very directly through email that way, right? It was a really low cost solution. It was win-win for both. These are the things that are really critical for startup thinking. And this is what we did for almost 2 years. That's all we did. And then about 6 months ago, I sort of saw in September, events are coming back. I think we're going to I think we're really going to be back in the next 6 months. So we need to kind of switch field and turn around and go back. And I think a lot of our marketing, again, as a startup, has been focused on relationships. As much as we can focus on building relationships, alliances in each industry, that is critical. And you've got to really focus on like, how can you, it's just got to be about service at this stage of the game. Like so much of what we do is like, how can I make this person's life better? What can I do for them? Making sure that it's, we're constantly thinking from the perspective of growth together, So that's really been like, it's just been such a wild journey for 2 years. Like any playbook I had like went in the trash and
I think when I was having a look at your profile and I checked out Tapple first and I knew it was a real world physical world company, and I saw that you joined in 2019 and I was like, oh god, I knew exactly like what happened next. So we also had another person on our show who also runs in physical world business. It's called Pour My Beer. Anyway, so yeah, I was just curious and I thought like, my god.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real test,
Yeah.
but I think for us, I mean, I won't say it was a good thing, but a lot of really good things came out of it, and we really saw what we were capable of doing. We all got a lot of great experience of, something that you can't manufacture that, right? That's probably, fingers crossed, never going to happen in our lifetime. So, there's a lot of great learning that happened there. And of course, QR.
Right. Wonderful. So, I mean, as things open up, they have opened up to, a large extent. So real world events, have surfaced again. So can you tell us how businesses can get started with event marketing in this point in time? And how do they make, the strategy? How do they promote their events?
Yeah. Well, I think there's always going to be the tried and true, you can send emails, et cetera. But we actually just had one of our clients who ran their live event show last year too. But really they did it sort of half scale. They used us for that then. But this year, what they did was, so it's America's Beauty Show. It's actually the largest beauty show in the United States. It has like 20,000 attendees and like 400 vendors. And they used Tapple for a bunch of different ways to promote ahead of time and drive conversion. So number one, using promoters who are out in the field, right? So who are your evangelists out in the world? So they used our product where they could, essentially those folks had their own personalized QR code. Could just pull it up on their phone. People could scan the front of the phone. Now we're tracking all and scoring all their engagement, all the conversions through each promoter. The second thing they did was, or anyone could do, is direct mail. Direct mail is making a massive comeback. If you haven't seen, they've had like a 20%, the industry is like 20% already just in the last year. Another change with the pandemic, right? It's like, how do we get to people? And our inboxes are cluttered as heck, right? It's like, I can't even think about it. It's probably 50 emails a day, right? That I'm just deleting. It's hard to weed through all that. Everybody looks through their mail.
Yeah.
Right? We all do. We all give each thing a glance. And so if something comes to you and it's relevant to you and, you went last year or 2 years ago, and here's a, 10% off if you scan this code here, it's a great way to also start tracking your direct mail performance as well. So they're using that for us for that as well. And then they also were using us for, let me just think for a second. There was a third way: direct mail, promoters. Oh yes. And then in the physical locations of these salons, right? Because they're looking for folks in the beauty industry. So students at schools and in salons, you can use QR there. Where are the physical environments, right? Where people are where your target audience is hanging out? How can you entice them to engage and make it quick? I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest mistakes too I see marketers make is like they slap a QR code on something. There's either no clear incentive, or it's like, now fill out this 35 question form. It's like, nobody's going to do that in the physical world, right? It's like, we're doing it.
Right.
So yeah, so I would say like getting down on the ground level of your consumer is incredibly important, be in their path.
Yeah. Karen, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us, from American East Coast. So we are really, really grateful to you for, giving us your time. Just last thing, would you like to nominate another awesome female marketing leaders like you for our show?
Sure. You should tap Nina Butler over at Alice. She's in Boston also. She is a director of marketing revenue. She's wonderful. And I would nominate her.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much once again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to our audience for sticking with us. We'll see you in the next episode of the Sales Panel discussions. Till then, be safe. Thank you.